Hey there, I'm Scott, and this is Tangents. Well, today I want to talk about something that has some layers and nuance to it, and as unfortunately always, this is in relation to something that happened on Twitter, although it's kind of a really general problem. Um, it's interesting actually because there are kind of two layers, or two, not really sides, but two facets of this. On one side, or one of the facets, there are many facets. Don't want to say like binary sides, but on one facet, there are things like Chris Brown beating up Rihanna, and then people are just kind of like rolling past that like it's no big deal. And then it's a big shock. I guess it's been years later when he's credibly accused of raping someone. But, it's like big fucking shock. So here you have something. I hate the term cancel culture because I don't think it really exists. Case in point, obviously, if it existed, um, at the very least, if it existed after he did that shit, there would have been some way for me to tell Apple Music to stop putting his shit in my weekly new music feed. And they didn't offer such a thing ever. If it existed, his career would have just ended. If it existed, you'd still be in the position to do that because obviously bad people do bad things, but it wouldn't be A, it wouldn't be a surprise to people, and B, it wouldn't be like, oh, he's just kind of like going about his business and things are back to normal, and oh, look at this, he also did this. It's like, if there was, so to some extent, I'm kind of advocating for cancel culture actually existing, um, in that sense. On the other side of this, I I just want to say that there are things that people will say or do where like one thing will be either misconstrued or it's like a subtle something with nuance, something with shades, and somebody can say something that they definitely mean, and it may even have some negative implications to it, but it's part of a large view, and looking at that one thing and especially extrapolating too much from that could lead you to essentially demonize somebody based on something that's not even what they think. So the reason that I bring this up, and I definitely want to be careful not to, I don't want to make this completely about a topic that I know just a superficial amount about. I definitely also don't want to make this come off as like defending myself. But there, there's a chat group that I'm in Twitter, and their goal is basically to unveil anti-vaxxers and kind of like shine a light on that stuff and push back, push for vaccine sanity, um, which is a common thing that we do a lot. In this group, I made an offhand remark, basically, so to give a little bit more context, somebody put in a tweet. People do this, they'll put in a tweet about something. Somebody asked what something was, and then I just kind of made this flippant remark that was, well, okay, that is chronic fatigue syndrome. And in the tweet, specifically, what I was talking about, it was an anti-vaxxer who was saying that certain vaccines are increasing, they're to be avoided by people who have autoimmune diseases because they can induce an autoimmune reaction. And this is a classic example of something which is extremely complicated and nuanced. There are many details to it, which, yeah, if somebody has a really severe autoimmune disease, giving them an adjuvant that stimulates their immune system, definitely not good. There's a continuum here though, because there's like, does somebody actually have a diagnosable autoimmune disease? Does somebody have something which um, is obviously real, which I'm definitely not saying that this is not something that has many cases where there's obviously something. I mean, chronic fatigue syndrome, without getting, again, I don't want to get too much into it, but there are many things like long-term sequela of having Epstein-Barr infections, which, I mean, it's really like a, this is the problem. It's something which is defined by a number of very non-specific things, and in this sort of constellation of stuff that satisfies these criteria, you lump in a bunch of things which are absolutely real, and then you lump in a bunch of things which are psychosomatic. I mean, it's very much like, in fact, anxiety. So anxiety can give you, like, I've only had in my life really one anxiety attack, and it feels like you're having a heart attack. It's like, in terms of, like, if you list the symptoms, if you list the presentation, it's shockingly similar. Yeah, now mine was, I knew it was an anxiety attack. I knew what kind of triggered it. So I knew, it wasn't a medical thing. But if I didn't know that and I didn't realize that, I would have just assumed it was a physical thing. So the problem with this chronic fatigue syndrome, as the name implies, it just is described as, like, you're tired all the time. You don't have energy, you don't have, and those are very non-specific symptoms. Now, those non-specific symptoms can absolutely be from real things, and there are a whole list of things that are absolutely real which fall under that umbrella. So yes, that is absolutely true, including probably certain kinds of autoimmune diseases, where you're actually influencing, you're having an autoimmune reaction to hormones, for example, or to hormone receptors. And things like this can give you fatigue that is just chronic. The problem is that there are also psychological conditions like depression, which will give you chronic fatigue. And so I made a very general, flippant statement, kind of said something to the effect of, like, in this case, this seems like something that they're referring to, which is largely like psychosomatic. And what I was talking about there is these anti-vaxxers. I mean, I was specifically talking about an anti-vaxxer kind of theory that vaccines are inducing autoimmune reactions, which are making chronic fatigue syndrome worse. And the problem is, again, like, chronic fatigue syndrome is not a diagnosis, it's not a disease, it is a set of kind of descriptive characteristics of what you're seeing. It's not something where, it's not like it's not something specific like, say, type 1 diabetes, or, I don't know, Graves' disease, or whatever. It's not like a specific thing. So you have this giant cluster of stuff, and it's designed and defined by a very non-specific set of criteria. And so I'm, like, talking about something which is a part of that. And in this conversation, I specifically said, like, I normally wouldn't say something like this in the larger, like, sphere of Twitter, because I don't want to, I'd come across like an asshole. But here in this case, I think what they're talking about is largely like psychosomatic stuff, which is related to people who are anti-vaxxers because they have, we have very real physical manifestations of things that are not causing, like, an actual disease. So, for example, if you inject somebody with saline, it is very possible to have placebo or nocebo effects. So things where, and in fact, when I say very possible, I mean it happens all the time. People will have a reaction, which is fundamentally just, it's not like they were injected with something other than something completely inert and benign. And of course, even there, you have to tease it apart, because simply puncturing the skin, if you have certain conditions, you can have a reaction to puncturing the skin or to injecting something in it. So that's like a real thing. And there's also placebo and nocebo kind of effects, which unfortunately, like our brains are really not good at teasing apart etiology and causation, even when you're like a trained doctor who does this stuff professionally, and especially when you're like a random person. And especially, I mean, there's like the case of what it's like from your perspective, looking into somebody else's life, like somebody else has a certain thing happen, versus what it is like from your perspective as the person experiencing that stuff internally. So if you have, you know, like if you're tired all the time, you're absolutely tired all the time. That doesn't mean I'm tired all the time. As a matter of fact, I have chronic insomnia. I am literally, like last night, I got like 4.5 hours of sleep, and I'm somehow relatively acclimated to it to the point where it's not obvious that I'm tired all the time externally. And if you wanted to say, like, Scott, you're not actually tired, yeah, you could. And I would understand somebody in my position feeling like you were denying that person's lived experience, which is absolutely not what I'm trying to say there. Yes, I am tired all the time. That is what that is what I claim. That is what I experience. And you should absolutely take me at my word on that, unless you have some reason to think I'm a chronic liar, or you have some objective way of knowing what my subjective experience of reality is, which obviously does not exist. So that being the case, I'm tired all the time. That is a statement of fact. Now, you're fatigued all the time. That is a statement of fact. Whatever the root cause of that, that absolutely is real. That is absolutely true. Zero question. Now, if you're tired all the time because you had, again, Epstein-Barr virus, just to go back to that one, or you have some chronic infection, or you have something wrong with insulin or something wrong with your thyroid. There are 1,000 things that will make you tired all the time. And it is debilitating. I'm tired all the time, and my functioning is not optimal, but I'm still like able to function. I understand there are people who have, this kind of experience, and they are just fundamentally not able to do anything. It happens to me sometimes. Like I'll be just physically unable to concentrate or to get anything done. And certainly, like if somebody has depression, for example, depression absolutely can cause this. I mean, it's almost like definitional. Can make you feel unable to do stuff, and not just feel, but actually like be. No matter how much will you have, you can just not get it together to be motivated to do stuff. That's real. That's absolutely real. And in many cases, there's some kind of known etiology for that, or some known cause for it. And even if there's not, like my insomnia, I assume, let's look at the sort of spectrum of possibilities here. It could just be I've been conditioned not to sleep well. That's certainly possible. It could be an anxiety disorder. I suspect that there's some like little tiny cluster of neurons someplace deeply buried in my brain that's just decided to like, fuck it. It's just not working. And they just don't, I'm dysregulated for sleeping. I can get to sleep easily, but then I'll sleep not nearly enough, wake up in the middle of the night, and then I'm in this sort of horrible state where I am very tired, but unable to get back to sleep. In fact, I'm kind of wired and tired at the same time. Like I'm so tired, I need to sleep, and I'm just like hyped up. I can't really explain what that's like, but it's annoying. So whatever the cause is, maybe there's some hormone that is off. Maybe I had a viral infection and it just wiped out some group of cells. Or maybe I have some autoimmune system problem, like I have self-reactive antibodies that are blocking some receptor or that are pretending to be some receptor, turning things on or off that shouldn't be. Maybe, I mean, you can go through a list of 1,000 things. Who knows? Fundamentally, I don't know. Is it psychosomatic that I have that? Well, I don't know. It could very easily be. And I don't think so. I think it's biological. But I just, with insomnia, chronic insomnia, no known etiology, it's an unknown, right? Unknown. So getting back to like chronic fatigue syndrome, which I didn't intend to spend this much time like actually getting into the weeds here, but if you have chronic fatigue syndrome and you're tired all the time, are you depressed? Are you experiencing sequela from some infection? Do you have an ongoing infection? Do you have some kind of diabetes? Do you have, I mean, you could just go on for a long list of things. And some of these are very biological. I mean, I guess fundamentally, even if it's psychological, this stuff in here is all biological and biochemical. So to some extent, but whatever it is, if it's no known etiology, it's just in this big cluster of unknowns. And to be clear, I'm not denying that you have that. And I'm also not saying, like everybody who has this is experiencing a psychosomatic thing. I feel like I'm kind of going in circles here, but seriously, what I'm trying to say is some people do. And I'm saying this informed by a number of things, including spending about a year in the emergency room at Tempe St. Luke's. I was a volunteer, but I got to encounter and spend a lot of time with a bunch of patients and talk to a lot of doctors and nurses, and then you would get people who came in with a variety of things. A lot of them would come in with very, I hesitate to use the word real, because everything is kind of real, but with things with obvious root causes. Somebody is in diabetic ketoacidosis. You know what that is, you know what caused it, you know all this stuff, you know how to treat it. It's all, And then you would get people who came in, like we got somebody who came in who was having a psychotic break. More than once, but one in particular I remember. This guy had PCP and ended up harming some people, harming himself, and was like, I got to spend some time with him, and he was kind of coming back to reality, but it was it's very disturbing. We got people who came in with actual dementia. It was a very sad and relatively common one, and you would see and experience, like, obviously this is a real thing. Do you know the cause? Yeah. It's it's in this sort of, maybe they have little myeloid things in their brain, or maybe they have some kind of vascular thing that's caused damage in their brain. Maybe, any of a number of things can cause it. And there are, some fraction, I think it's a pretty significant fraction from the literature. I want to say it was like, I know it was over 10%. I want to say it was like 20 or 30%. Don't quote me on the numbers because, I don't remember, but a very significant fraction of the people who present with that have no known etiology. That doesn't mean that they're not really having it. It's just you don't know what it is. So in this ER, certain people would come in with certain presentations, and the doctors would basically, conclude, and the nurses as well, would kind of conclude, like, this is probably psychosomatic. And obviously you don't know, but there are a lot of hints that kind of lead to that. And you could see there are a lot of things where there's obviously a psychological component to it. And it's just, anyway, I'm getting beyond my depth here. I don't really want to go like I said, don't really want to get into the weeds. But suffice it to say, I've experienced indirectly a lot of this kind of stuff. I've seen healthcare professionals, I've talked with them about this stuff, I've looked into the literature. And again, superficially, I do not mean to imply that I've deeply dove in. I can't say the word. You know what I'm trying to say. I have not dived deeply into this stuff. And obviously, like there are people who spend their entire career studying stuff like this. I am not an expert in this domain. It is not my thing. So what happened here was I kind of, in shorthand, dismissed this combination of things, which was, again, the people who are having, I'm not saying like the adverse reactions to a vaccine are all psychosomatic. Certainly they can be real, but let's just say there's reason to suspect some of them are psychosomatic. And then you have this combination of that plus, this kind of general uncited statement someone was making in a tweet. And I did not want to research it at the time. I definitely didn't want to go into a lot of depth on it. I didn't mean anything by it beyond that. And I would say certainly I understand, like, somebody in this group has chronic fatigue syndrome and took that as kind of both triggering for obvious reasons, and I would say took what I said very much out of context and kind of overgeneralized it. But at the same time, I mean, part of the thing is, like, if you have PTSD and you have a medical condition which a lot of people don't believe or don't, they kind of dismiss it, roll it off. When somebody says something like that, you can easily understand how somebody's going to take that as me just kind of, oh, you don't really, this is not what I was saying, but you could see why this person would think, oh, yeah, you don't really have that, ha ha ha. Now, I don't think that. I don't at all. I do think there are cases where there is a psychological component. I do think there are cases where it's psychosomatic. I'm not saying all, I'm not saying even many, but some fraction. And I don't think it's like one or two. I think it's a material kind of substantial fraction. But there are many other things in there. And I certainly am not a doctor, not that kind of doctor. I don't know this person's history. I don't know anything about them. And I wasn't making a statement about them. I was making a statement about this other thing, which I feel pretty comfortable in saying what I said about this other thing. I understand why this other person thinks that I was saying something about them, even though I didn't realize they were even in the group. And in retrospect, I think it's just one of these things where, like, even putting this video out, honestly, I assume somebody will find it at some point and somebody will be like, oh, see, there Scott is. Yeah, ha ha ha. And it's the most frustrating thing about this kind of stuff, because it's like, I'm just throwing my hands up, really, because I don't really want to defend myself. I don't, part of it is also, I'm not trying to defend myself against something that is not what I said or what I think. And when you have somebody who interprets whatever you say in a different way, at a certain point, you're kind of like, well, okay, even just the act of defending, like, I'm not trying to defend the position that you think that I have, because I don't have that fucking position. And it's kind of fucking annoying to me, and if I may be so bold, a little bit triggering, honestly, to sit there and insinuate that I'm saying something that I'm not saying. I don't mind. I mean, it actually really irritates the shit out of me. I don't mind being, like, if I have a thought, or if I have a belief or an understanding of something that is wrong, or you think is wrong, or you don't like, and you want to drag me for it, then go ahead, by all means. What I don't really like or appreciate is when I don't, or I have, in this case, a nuanced thing Um, and you're taking that little subtle thing that's just like a little hint of something, and you're turning it into like, oh, you're just totally prejudiced against people that have chronic fatigue syndrome. You just don't believe, you just think everybody who has chronic fatigue syndrome is lying, or they're just, and this is another thing also. A, I never fucking said that. B, I don't think probably almost anyone with chronic fatigue syndrome is lying. Even the ones that very likely have just a psychosomatic kind of thing, they're not lying, you know. And the people who have like actual some kind of medical etiology behind it, they're definitely not lying. Neither one of those is, you know, if you're depressed, does it matter even that you're depressed because you have some chemical imbalance or you're just depressed situationally? In some sense, yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously it's different and the prognosis and all this is different, but to some extent, yeah, you're just, you make a statement, I'm tired. It's an objective, I mean, it's a subjective expression of how you feel, but it is objectively true that you, as far as anyone can tell, you feel tired. That is, you know, what you're saying. Um, anyway, I'm just kind of rambling on here, but it irritates me. It's one of these things also, like I had to talk to this well, didn't have to talk to this person. Somebody asked me to talk to this person. I knew going in it was not going to go well, because basically, like, I mean, here's the thing, as far as I'm concerned about this kind of thing, and I've been in a situation like this a handful of times, and I just don't feel like there's a good solution to it. Like there's a solution where I just accept, you know, yes, I was totally saying exactly what you said I was saying or what you thought I was saying, and I'm so sorry, and I really didn't mean it, and oh, I'm gonna go through, you know, this basically like flogging that you want me to go through, and then I will have learned and I'll experience it, and now I've released my prejudice against it. That's I could do that. I would be lying if I did that. Partly, I would be lying because I don't believe the fucking shit that you think I believe. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just, it irritates me. If I believed it, then by all means, you know, feeling like I'm an asshole is totally fair. And I mean, it's always fair to feel like I'm an asshole. But if you're gonna feel like I'm an asshole, feel like I'm an asshole for reasons that actually are grounded in something about me or something about what I think, and not like this distorted kind of funhouse view of it. And at the same time, I am trying to be understanding that, you know, if you have PTSD, people have denied you feel the way you do, they deny your experience, they deny that anything is wrong with you. You know, I mean, like the insomnia, just to keep going back to myself here, but I've had insomnia for over a decade. I've had many, many people who don't understand. Like insomnia doesn't sound. It's one of these things, and I think, you know, and I'm not trying to imply that I understand what it's like to have chronic fatigue syndrome, but I think in both cases there are things where you're experiencing this horrible thing all the time. You cannot, or a large fraction of the time, you can't do anything about it, and it also does not present in a way that, you know, like if you have like a broken bone or something, people can look at that, they're like, oh, okay, you got a broken bone, they understand. If you say like, I just can't sleep, it sounds like you're making shit up, or like, you know, you can't, what does that even mean, you can't sleep? It doesn't sound real. It doesn't sound like a thing that even could happen. And you have, so you're saying you have plenty of time to sleep, but you decide not to sleep. And no, I don't decide. I just fucking wake up in the middle of the night and I can't get back to sleep. I can't fucking get back to sleep. It's like a joke. It's like why would you not be able to? It sounds crazy. I agree. I am trying to say here, like, I fucking empathize with you. I understand where you're coming from, at least to the extent that I possibly can. I have a similar kind of thing. And I know how fucking annoying it is when somebody just either completely dismisses it, or the one that I love is one of the reasons I like, another one of the places where I kind of censor myself on Twitter And in life is like, I don't complain about being tired that often. I will, sometimes I'm like so tired, it kind of ebbs and flows, you know? I'm kind of tired all the time, but sometimes I'm just like so fucking tired, I can't, and I will let it slip like, oh, I'm so fucking tired. And the reason I don't do that mostly is because I know there will be a ton of well-meaning people who, first off, they're like, oh, I understand what it's like to be tired. You've experienced the thing where like you couldn't sleep for a couple days, or you know you got a little bit less sleep last night. I don't think this kind of chronic insomnia is a thing that most people, luckily, most people can't relate to. I've known people who have much worse than me. There was somebody from grad school who I went to school with, and she had chronic insomnia, but mine came on when I was like in my mid to late 20s, sometime around, I don't even know when exactly, but someplace around there. She had it from like the age of 8 or 10 and her whole life. And mine is like, okay, sometimes I'll get 3 hours of sleep. Sometimes I'll get 4. Occasionally I'll even get 5. And, you know, once a week or two, I'll actually get like 6 hours of sleep. It sounds almost reasonable. You know, it sucks, but it's not like insane. She would get like a couple hours of sleep and then just, you know, not be able to sleep. I mean, or some nights not even be able to sleep at all. And you see that and you're like, how is that even fucking possible? And she was a little weird. And I can kind of understand why she'd be a little bit weird, because I'm a little bit weird just from not getting enough sleep, and I'm getting way more sleep than she is. You can understand, like, it probably grates on you. It probably, I feel like it's doing like damage. Like, I don't feel like it's just inconsequential. I don't feel like it's just that, you know, I'm not as focused or effective. Certainly my memory is not as good as it used to be, but also like I feel like it's doing long-term harm. I'm basically like beating the shit out of my brain by not getting enough sleep, and yet I can't fucking do anything about it. It's one of these things also. You know, I mean, to put a finer point on this, there are people who, you know, go rolling back a second before I get to this, but you know, like people will tell you, okay, do some CBD, Scott, or take some pot, do the pot, Scott, or that people really love that one, and I've never tried it, probably never will, may someday, but I don't think it's magically gonna help. I'm sorry. The main motivation I would have to try it, honestly, although I would never, like smoking in general, I'm very, very opposed to, so probably try an edible at some point, maybe. But when I do, the main reason I want to try it, or the main reason I can even think of that I'm at all curious about trying it, is because I'm annoyed by people telling me just, oh, you do this and then it'll make you sleep. I don't think so, and I kind of want to do it just to demonstrate. No, probably not, or maybe it will. I don't know, but you know, in my experience, the only thing that has ever helped me was I was in France and I was sick, and I went to the pharmacy. They gave me cough syrup with Finagrin and codeine. And I took a big swig of that, and certainly more than the recommended dose. Not like a ridiculous amount, but more than the recommended dose. And I slept like, I was still sick the next day, but it was the first time in years where I was, which actually tells you how long this has been, because that has been already a decade, and I was already like, you know, I've probably had insomnia like a decade and a half plus. But anyway, took a swig of it the next day. I'm still sick, but I felt rested. The first time in years I actually felt rested. Like I slept 8, 9 hours maybe even, and I woke up and it was like, I still feel like shit, but this cloud has been lifted over my head. You know, like it's, I felt great. Obviously, you can't overdose on Finagrin and codeine on a regular basis. A, because it's really dangerous. B, because I'm sure I would develop tolerance very quickly. You know, cause some harm to other things. It's not a good thing. But that's the one thing that I've ever experienced that worked. I've tried so many different things. I've tried more recently cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. I've tried, you know, like certain things like, oh, you want to set up your sleep hygiene. You want to keep stuff away from the bed area. You want to keep the time before you sleep. You don't want to get like excited or agitated. You don't, all these things. I've tried a lot of stuff. I've tried like Lunesta and all of these, a handful of different drugs. And I'll tell you, like the experience that I've had, what is the one, the worst one that I did, God, my doctor wrote me a prescription for, I can't think of the name. You're probably screaming it out because it's like the most obvious thing that everyone recommends when you have trouble sleeping, and it's not coming to me. But whatever it is, it's gonna drive me nuts. It will, as soon as I break from this, it will spit right out of my mouth. But it's something that people talk about, and it's like, oh, it causes you to dissociate, or you'll like end up waking up in the middle of the night and having a pie and not remember it, or like people go out and do stuff. Never had any effect like that at all on me. But what it did do, and in fact, it didn't help me sleep at all. I tried several different doses. I tried, several different nights. Did not help me sleep. But what it did do is I took it a couple nights and then I stopped taking it, and I had a horrible rebound reaction. Like I went my normal shitty amount of sleep, maybe 2 or 3 nights, and then finally I'm like, fuck this is worthless. And then stopped it, and it was like, oh, I got like an hour of sleep. This is fucking great. Maybe 45 minutes, something ridiculous. And it went on for several days. Like, it wasn't maybe a full week, but it was more than half a week. I couldn't get back to sleep. I was just like, and I felt like I just broke something. Honestly, I was like, shit, I don't want to try that stuff again. I tried it once or twice after that because, like I said, I'll get in these positions where like I just have fucked up sleep. I'm so tired one day, even by my own standards, and then you're just desperate. You're fucking desperate, and you're gonna try anything. I've tried it, did not help again, and so I've got a tube of a bunch of these pills I'm never going to use because it's like, well, yeah, it doesn't help, but it does cause a rebound, which is awesome. It's going to kill me. Why I can't think of that. Anyway, I've tried that. I've tried a bunch of other stuff. I got a fucking MRI I've gotten EEGs and couldn't really see anything. I mean, it's good. Nothing's wrong with me physically or on my EEG, but it's also kind of annoying because it'd be like, oh, look at this, you have something here and we can do something about that maybe. But no, it's just nothing. Who knows? So again, is that psychosomatic? I don't know. Don't know. Could be. I don't know. If you're feeling fatigued all the time, is it psychosomatic? I don't know. I'm certainly not saying yes, definitively it is. For this person, I was certainly not saying it was in that case. And I'm not even saying it is the majority of the time. But the problem is, like, people, I don't know, it's this thing that I talk about all the time, which is you have this high dimensional space in your head, and communication is already like compressing that down to a very low dimensional space. And not only that, that person is expanding it out in their own basis, which is not necessarily, even though we lived in similar cultures and speak the same language, their basis is definitely not the same as your basis, is not the same as my basis. And then on top of that, this person has experienced a lot of people denying stuff, has experienced these things, and then you get a little hint of something that's kind of vaguely in the vicinity of something like that. And it's like, oh shit, you're fucking an asshole. You're this person that I imagine. It's like, no, I'm not the person that you imagine. But also, like, what the fuck am I gonna do? Am I gonna go back and, I mean, this is the situation I find myself in, because it's like, okay, they offered me, I go, okay, you can talk to some people, here's some stuff. And it's like, I've talked to people, I've seen this stuff, I know this is a real thing. You're treating me, I mean, it actually, weirdly enough, the disease you think I have, I do not have. And you're treating me as though I did, which is kind of weirdly, vaguely, almost the same as what you think I'm doing to you, which is just saying like, oh, just you have this. So here, this is what's actually wrong with you. No, thank you very much. I don't. Yeah, it's fucking annoying actually. Like but the problem is like, am I gonna do that? Am I gonna go through the motions? Am I gonna talk to this person and like go back and forth and try to explain myself? Because that's gonna be productive. I mean, I would imagine if this person watched this video, even though I've said many, many different things, they latch on to the couple of things that sound like what they're looking for. Because we do have, as human beings, we're very good at confirmation bias. You kind of decide something is in this bucket, and then everything that comes in after that just, oh yeah, more evidence that it's in the bucket. I was right. I was right. Yep, totally right. It doesn't matter if there are things that don't fit at all. It doesn't matter. Everything else you kind of just admit. Oh yeah, I was of course I was right. Yeah, asshole. So anyway, it is kind of, it never occurred to me that they were doing what they think I was doing until now, just kind of talking it out. This is a weird, I don't want to suggest in any way that this is like therapy, because there's a very important aspect of like having a therapist, having somebody who is kind of objectively out there interacting with you, not just observing, because therapy is not just like you're just blathering on and observing or being observed. It's kind of a conversation, a dialogue. I mean, there are different types of therapy, obviously. This is another one of these things where it's like nuance. I am taking something that is this giant fucking ball of lots of different shit, and I am taking just a subtle, tiny little piece of it. And I'm, just to be clear, I'm not saying it is all like this. I'm just saying that, like this piece is like this. And sometimes I didn't do it there, but sometimes I'll speak in generalizations when I'm talking about this, like, oh, therapy is this. I don't mean that all therapy is that. I mean that, like the kinds of therapy that I've generally done and found effective tend to be like, and you use it as shorthand. I mean, the problem is if you don't use it as shorthand and you try to be absolutely explicit about everything that you say, especially on Twitter, where you're like trying to get everything down to 250 something characters, you're just gonna do like 2,000 tweets to get around the most basic, simple, obvious concept. And it doesn't matter anyway, because somebody's gonna see those and they're gonna see like the 3 or 4 tweets that, trigger them or that they'll interpret in a certain way. And then you're in the same fucking boat. So like I'm saying, I could sit there, I could try to explain myself to this person. That's gonna go very badly. I've been down that road. I know, like, I mean, first off, if you're acting if somebody's accusing you of something and you're acting defensive about it, it doesn't help. If somebody's saying you're totally an asshole who is very prejudiced, you're very bigoted, I think was the word that they used. It's like, if I'm sitting there, if somebody said, if I said, no, I'm not, they're not going to believe me. Why would they even, honestly? And I could explain myself, but no amount of explanation is going to change this person's mind. Maybe in time, things would. But like I said, I'm not going to do the thing where I'm lying to them and going through the motions. Both because A, it would be a lie, and even though it would be a lie that made the person feel better, I don't like lying to people. It's not something that I'm very good at, first of all. Small, subtle point on that. If I'm joking, somehow I can say stuff and be just completely deadpan and, like I don't even mean to be convincing, but I will be like so convincing people don't know. And I have to explain, I was kidding. But if I'm actually like trying to deceive somebody, it's just, I guess I haven't really tried it in years. Maybe I'd be better at it now. But the last time I tried, it does not come across convincing. Let's just say that. It's like somehow I just have a million tells when I'm doing it, and it's just, it's not going to work. So I don't do it, partly because of that, partly because I'm just, and partly also because I always remember this case. This was one of the dumbest things, and I don't know why I did it. I don't know why I said it, but it stuck with me. It really stuck with me and left a very strong impression, which was basically the lying is not worth it. I was a kid, and I don't remember the exact circumstance, but I think it was my dad asked me if I ate. And for some reason, and I don't know why I said, like, why would, little kid, why would you say this? I said I did. I was at my friend's house. I said I ate. I didn't eat. I don't know why I said, like, there was no advantage to saying that and yet, like I did. And then it went down this whole path from there. And just from that one little thing, and I'm not saying like it blew up into this massive thing, but it's like, okay, you ate, and then there are the consequences of this, and you go like 2 or 3 logical steps down, and it ends up proliferating into this big thing, and then you're like, why did I say this little thing? Because, which I feel like this is a lesson Trump never learned, because it's like his whole thing is just lying and lying and lying, and when you tell even a small lie like that, it has so many consequences that it forces you, first off, it forces you to remember a bunch of bullshit. Much easier to just remember the stuff that actually happened. But second, you end up lying a bunch more to make that lie consistent. And it's really, like, you get to a position where it's kind of like, okay, I said I ate and I didn't, and so now we're not going to eat, but I'm hungry, and now am I going to say that? And then you start thinking about it, and you're like, okay, well, if you already ate, then we're not going to do this, or we'll do this. And you get like 3 steps down, and it's like, well, shit, why didn't I say the truth here, first of all? And also, like, why? I mean, here's the hard thing. Once you're there, you've already, like, that first one you could just say, it's a weird fucking thing to say. I don't know why, again, I don't know why I said it. But there you could just say, no, that's not true. I didn't eat. Done. You can move on. But because you said that, now you get over here and you've got 3 or 4 other things that have come from that. And now if you come back and say, well, actually, I didn't eat, it's not like you're just popping the bubble on that one. These other things now you've said, and it just gets into this big fucking quagmire so fast. So anyway, the short answer of all of that, or the summary of all of that, is basically I don't do it partly because it's just like, it's not, in my very limited experience of it, it has not worked out well. Let's just say that. So anyway, I can see a path where it's like, okay, you think I think this, I kind of, do the come to Jesus thing. Oh yes, you're right. I totally did think that. I mean, less sarcastically, right? But I totally did think that, and all this, and then I'll go through your whole remediation process, and then blah blah blah, and then you get to a point where, like, down the road, and you can just foresee, you go through this process, and then after a certain time, it's like, oh yeah, now I totally understand what you're saying, and I get it now. And you're lying all the time, by the way. All of those things are lies, which is not to say that, like, I do get it, but it's not like I don't get it now. It's that you've put me in a position where if I went through this process, I would have to be lying to you, saying, oh, I didn't get it, and now I do. I don't want to fucking do that for a variety of reasons. But I especially, like, I don't want to go through the process. I don't want to go through, I don't like lying. I don't like doing the whole fucking, so that one, closed for me. I'm not going to fucking do that. And then you have this other situation where it's like, okay, I could defend myself. I mean, basically what I ended up doing was kind of saying, yeah, I said this thing. This is what I meant. I understand why you took it badly. And I kind of left it there at trying to be fairly detached, like, factual level, and let them blow a bunch of words at me. And then it's like, okay, yeah, I get it. That's where we are. I'm sorry, you know. And of course, really am genuinely sorry, but I'm sorry. It's not a I'm sorry that you feel bad about what I said kind of thing, which they kind of dismissed it as, but it's more I'm sorry that I said something that was sort of sloppy enough that it allowed you to misconstrue it and take it badly. And I definitely did not want, yeah, I wasn't trying to be dismissive of you or your own experiences. I know you have a real thing. I wasn't saying that, that you don't. I was just saying this other thing. But you can't, it's just like, it's hard to explain that. And then, you know, if you do explain it and you start like going into the weeds too much there, ends badly. And so I just kind of left it at that. And I was like, you know, without too much explanation or trying, I was trying very, very strongly not to defend myself or not to sort of, yeah, basically to take it as much as possible without saying anything that was untrue. But also not a good path. I mean, the thing is, the problem is like once you get down a certain trajectory, once somebody decides a certain thing about you, it's especially something like this, you're kind of fucked, honestly. So it's annoying though. I mean, this is the thing that to get back to the Chris Brown thing. In this case, it's like this one thing that somebody's decided, and now to that person, you're just like the fucking devil. Yeah, you're just, or maybe not the devil, but you know, you're a bad person. You think these things. You're prejudiced. You, the person that's dismissing them, and all of this stuff. And that person is just like done. Versus, you know, unfairly in my small estimation, but you know, they're just done. Versus this case where you have somebody who very clearly did something very real, very serious, very like, you know, I would say pretty much unforgivable. You know, I'm not, well, I don't know. I know there are, especially the sort of Christianity thing, there's a whole thing about like forgiving and forgiveness is a virtue and all this kind of stuff. I don't think forgiveness is a thing that, I do think you can, no matter what you do, even if it's something horrible, there is a path to forgiveness. Like if you've genuinely done something terrible, and I might even call it irredeemable. But again, I say irredeemable, I mean, you know, it's like, it's shorthand. There's a lot more detail than that. But, you know, like it's so bad that you pretty much, you know, there's not a lot of coming back from whatever it was. There is maybe a path, like that happened 1,000 years ago. And from the time that you did that, you know, imagine you have an extended lifespan. From the time that that happened, you've genuinely gone through a path where you've developed like sincere remorse and sincerely have gone through working out this thing and sincerely have done everything you possibly can to make amends for it. And then maybe eventually down the road, even then, I don't know that you necessarily, I don't believe in this forgive and forget idea, but I do think you can kind of say, okay, I'm willing to forgive you to the extent that I will look past, like, I will remember what you did, but I can look past it, and you will be on a sort of probation where, yeah, we'll kind of go forward. That's water under the bridge, but, you know, if you do something that kind of suggests that your redemption arc was not sincere, then, you know, you're kind of on a spring trigger. That's all I'm saying. That kind of forgiveness I'm fine with. And the thing that people do, though, is they're like, I mean, you're going back to Trump. It's hard not to because he's such a fucking annoying, just blight on the world. But this guy, you know, people, what are they called? The evangelicals liked to forgive him. He never asked for forgiveness. He never showed any sign of remorse or redemption. And they would still like just, oh yeah, you're totally forgiven. It's totally cool. Yeah, you buy any of our tenants, our massive center, and a horrible person and all of this stuff. Not just to act like a horrible person, but you kind of, I do make this point generally of the things you did were bad versus you're a bad person. In his case, I think like kind of not a good person, you know. I don't think it's just like the things that he did. And of course, obviously, like, I mean, this is the problem because it's the same, subtlety and nuance. You peel back a couple layers and it's like, okay, well, I don't think he was like born a demon spawn, like just inherently evil. I think, he probably, maybe he had some temperamental issues, maybe not, I don't know. But Fred was a massive dick. I mean, I don't think any of us would be okay. Maybe a few people have like some kind of just amazing temperament and they would just be resilient enough to be unaffected by that. But most of us, if we had Fred Trump as a dad, we'd be fucked up in some way or another. Now, I do think you take the combination of maybe he had some kind of temperamental foundation, and then you take the Fred Trump thing, you take other experiences in his life, and then that kind of leads him over the course of many decades to be the person that he is now. And, is he irredeemable? Well, I do think, like, if he was going to live 1,000 years, there's some path that he could take where he could actually, like, recognize that he's done all these horrible things. He could come to terms with it, and he could kind of actually start making amends and start trying to make things better and start, it's possible. I don't think it's fucking likely. And certainly, he's not going to live to be 1,000 years. Well, hopefully, I mean, that'd be one of the most horrifying thoughts that I have with any frequency is, you have like Peter Thiel, who's out there trying to do life extension. And this guy's already a massive asshole billionaire and doing all kinds of harm. If you imagine like this guy actually succeeded and was able to live for hundreds of years, the harm that he would do is incalculable. And also, like, once you get to be, there's a certain threshold where if you have beyond, maybe it's $10 million, maybe it's $100 million, but it's certainly $1 billion or safe. At some level, if you are not an idiot and you don't just squander the money, you can even do like ridiculous things like buy houses and lots of, but there's a level where you're like, it doesn't matter. Like you cannot physically spend all the money that is accruing from that certain amount of assets at a certain point. And you imagine also like you're going to live for a long time. You're the person that got there. I mean, at a certain point, he would be a trillionaire. It would just happen. Now, he wouldn't be the only one probably because other people would have this, but it would be, and you imagine also, I mean, just the harm that he would do, the connections that he would make, the amount of stuff, it's already bad, but at least he's self-limited. If you imagine him not being self-limited in terms of having a finite window of opportunity to do terrible things, and you imagine the same thing with Trump. The fact that Trump, I do think, I mean, if you look at Fred, I think he lived another 15, 20 years beyond where Trump is now. And you think about the harm that this fucker could do in that time, which, granted, maybe he's not maybe he's not as healthy as his dad was. He's got a mix of genes that aren't just his dad's. Maybe he won't make it that long, but just naturally, odds are pretty decent he does. And then you imagine, like, already with that, it's bad. And if he was able to get life extension, it'd be horrific. It'd be really fucking horrible. I mean, it's a thing. It's one of the few things that I would love. I know people who are like bored with life and who just want it to be over with quickly. I would love personally, like if I could be as healthy as I am now, and especially if I could be like mid-20s, early 30s, kind of like biologically that you're just there, and then live indefinitely. That'd be awesome. Now maybe there's some point in the distant future where you're kind of tired of stuff. You've done everything. You kind of feel satisfied. Maybe, but not foreseeable future for me. I mean, it would be a long ways out. I could certainly I would imagine hundreds of years is no problem. A millennium is probably not that big of a deal. Um, it's a thing also, like you think about like 100 years sounds like a lot of time, especially when you're a kid. But the closer you get to it, the shorter it is, right? And then you get to a certain point, you're kind of like, well, shit. I mean, I remember distinctly when I was in middle school, a week seemed like forever. Like waiting a week for something, it seemed like an interminable period. Like to such an extent that I was just like, oh, please move faster time, which is a crazy thing from my perspective now to say. And now a fucking year is just like flash paper just goes up. And it's like, how the fuck is it 2022? Like, I don't even know how it's the end. Today is the 28th of January as I record this. I remember when it was the first. It seemed like yesterday. I remember when it was 2021. Seemed like yesterday. And so you kind of go back through this stuff. Anyway, going back here, I don't really have anything to say. I'm not trying, I want to make it clear that I'm not trying to speak in my own defense here, because I don't think, first off, I don't think there's anything to defend, but also, I'm more just, and I'm not even specifically talking about this case in particular. I'm more talking about this sort of general thing where, and especially on Twitter, another very weird, super unrelated thing happened on Twitter today, which was in the same group where you're talking about people who are anti-vaxxers or talking to anti-vaxxers. Somebody made a comment and then, kind of went back and forth. mRNA is a really big thing for these people because even though coronaviruses are positive sense single-stranded RNA viruses, which means that their genome is literally mRNA, if you get infected by COVID-19 or any other coronavirus, it literally injects mRNA into your cells. So if mRNA is so bad, I mean, which also, here's a spoiler, here's a shocker. All the proteins in your body, and again, maybe there are some exceptions where you get, but basically the proteins that you're making, generally speaking, that follow the classic DNA to RNA to protein, transcription and translation, all of those go through mRNA made in your cells by you. So mRNA, the perfectly normal fucking thing. You get a, air quotes, natural infection, that's also mRNA. The only difference with the vaccine is, or I say the vaccine, it's another annoying thing about these anti-vaxxers, because even though there are a bunch of different vaccines, they all kind of lump them together. You can tell they're mostly talking about the Pfizer one, but they're kind of, it's very blobby. Like there's not a lot of attention to detail, and not a lot of nuance in their thinking or their conversation. But they're talking about these mRNA vaccines, and they're like, "Oh, mRNA is bad," and so I'm explaining, no, it's not bad. It's not. It's just the thing about the mRNA vaccines is, which is amazing, is basically they've taken out, like, imagine you have either more traditional vaccines. They're either made out of dead virus or dead pathogen, whatever it is, and then you're injecting that plus an adjuvant and hoping that you build an immune response to whatever that is, or they're a live attenuated kind of thing, and that live attenuated one just doesn't cause the same disease, but either way, you're eliciting an immune response, but you're putting in the whole fucking thing. So that virus has a bunch of different proteins and other materials in it, and you're going to take that, your body will chew it up, develop an immune response to a lot of different stuff in there, and some of them will be protective and some of them won't. Versus these vaccines, they can take like just specifically the part that elicits a protective immunity. Like in a normal infection, you'll get antibodies to a bunch of different antigen sites, and some of them will block like binding of that thing to your cells, which prevents infection, and some of them just won't do a damn thing. They'll just sit there, and it's like, so once you know how to do that, you can kind of cut out that part that produces protective antibodies, and then use just the sequence that codes for that and gets translated into that that polypeptide or that protein, build an immune response to that, and now you've got an immune response that is just very specific and very targeted. It's like, and also you're not putting infectious or potentially infectious particles into somebody. You're just putting in something that, I mean, the nature of mRNA is that there are RNases everywhere, and mRNAs they have a, like, they're transcribed, or sorry, they're translated, excuse me, or they are transcribed from the DNA, sit in your cell, they're translated to proteins, and then very quickly they're kind of chewed up and just broken down and they're gone. So you'll have these things, and just by nature of how this works, it makes a bunch of protein, and then the thing that's coding for the protein is just destroyed. And the protein itself will be destroyed because you have a bunch of proteases in your body on a longer time scale, but still that will happen. And all that remains is the immune response that it elicited. So that is a thing which is pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but also it's like using a scalpel instead of a bludgeon, instead of a dull kitchen knife to do something where you have a bunch of other stuff and you're just kind of like hacking away. You're using a fine scalpel and just doing exactly the right thing that works. It's a magical thing. I mean, in terms of technology, it's something that people aspired to for a long time, and now that they can do it, it's fucking amazing. And it's going to be kind of a revolution, really, in terms of this stuff, because once you can do it for one, you can do it for a bunch of other shit. And so in this process, we were talking about it, and it came up, okay, you have the RNA, and then I said, and this was not correct, but I said it just to be, really to kind of like gloss over a little bit of detail, which is irrelevant detail. But I said, like, the vaccine is an adjuvant in addition to having and yeah, the vaccine is not exactly an adjuvant. Usually the adjuvant is something that's added to it, but it gets complicated here because the liposomes themselves that are encapsulating this mRNA, and the mRNA itself, all kind of make your immune system a little bit angry and act as adjuvants. So you can't really say that you're adding it, and then you start going in there, and if you start getting really into the weeds there, you could go on for like 20, 30 minutes about the details and the subtle nuances of what the thing is doing, and what's causing what, and what is the adjuvant, or what are the adjuvants, and all of this. And I was just trying to, but it was kind of another one of these cases where it's like, okay, I'm just going to peel this one kind of layer. In fact, I was going to use the onion, but I'm making an impressionistic painting, and I could be painting like every fucking detail, one of these things where the painting is indistinguishable from a photograph. I could do that. But most of that stuff is a lot of work that you don't need. I'm just kind of like drawing a couple big broad strokes and sort of giving you the general idea of what I'm talking about without going into all of the subtleties and the nuance. And the problem is, like, if you don't understand that those subtleties and nuances are there, and you think, oh, this is the picture, then it falls apart, or there are problems with it. And then when you start digging down and you start to go, well, okay, I drew this line, but really this line, if you start, it's all of these things. And then you start going, okay, well, look at this. And then we start going into the details there. And then pretty soon you're like, okay, this tiny little dot, which was part of your stroke, or it wasn't even in your stroke, that's somebody's PhD thesis or dissertation. It's just like that one little fucking thing. It's a big thing. There's a lot of detail to it. And it's a problem when you try to talk about stuff, because you're taking that tiny, thin spaghetti of words coming from, the whole of what's in your brain, and what's in your mind is not even, it's a tiny, tiny fraction of what's actually, like, you have all the details, and then you have some kind of understanding of it. Even if you're an expert, your understanding is not perfect, and it's not going to be complete. And so you have that partial, incomplete, imperfect understanding of it, and then you're condensing that down to something which is like a tweet, or a few words, and obviously you're going to lose a lot in the translation. And so this is, I feel like you kind of have to understand, I mean, just with any human communication. I mean, this is actually part of where the principle of charity comes from, because it's like, okay, if I say this, you could interpret it charitably and think, okay, it sounded a little iffy, but maybe you meant it this way, and go on. Or you could go like, ah, yeah, aha, I got you. And I feel like apply the principle of charity a little bit would be nice. Um, but anyway, it's like it's just a frustrating thing. And it's also a frustrating it's one of these things. I mean, obviously you can tell just from this, I will blather on for a very long time. And part of it is not, I don't feel like the whole of what I'm saying is just randomly bumping around and not getting anywhere, like talking in circles. I think I'm actually like getting to a point, or I'm kind of in the vicinity of a point, and kind of, I like to think of the tangents that I'm going off of as like, just drawing these strokes. And in the end, when you step back, it kind of looks like something, like a picture. Even though the strokes kind of seem haphazard, once you see them in the context of the greater thing, they all actually form kind of a coherent whole. As opposed to something that, what is it called? Illocution, I think it's called. I'm probably, I mean, I think that's it. It's something locution. It's going to drive me nuts. It's another one of these words that will come to me as soon as I'm done. Ambient, holy shit. There it is. That was the, way back before I was done. But this one, one of the symptoms or one of the signs, I guess it's more of a symptom, but one of the things that presents in dementia is this thing where people forget what they're saying, and they'll ramble on, but never really get anywhere. It's just kind of like haphazard. I'm trying to contrast what I do with that. Maybe you look at it and you're like, this is just a bunch of random bullshit. I like to at least think going someplace. But anyway, it's going to drive me nuts what that word is now. It's like on the tip of my brain, and again, it will pop in. But with that, gonna just kind of like relax and be done with it for the day. I am almost, it's 16:37 right now on a Friday. So I'm probably not going to do any more work today. Probably going to wrap up and get ready to go. And I think this is probably a good breaking point, because I've probably blathered on long enough for you to get to sleep by now. So lullaby and good night, all of that stuff. But in reality, thank you as always for listening and watching. Apologies if you took anything that I said badly. And when I say that, I'm not, there's a whole, I don't even want to get into the subtleties of a good apology. I don't mean that in the sense of, I'm sorry that you interpreted what I said badly. But I do mean, like, never mind. Just fuck it. Take it however the fuck you want. If you want to take it as a bad apology, be my guest. Honestly, at a certain point, it's just not even worth arguing. It's not worth arguing. That's all I'm saying. I just don't care that much. There are certain things that are worth the time and the effort to really go into, and at a certain point, it's just like, if you're gonna think bad things about me, and they're based on things which I think are not accurate, it's unfortunate, but is it worth the trouble? I mean, probably not. I'm sorry that it's not worth it to me to do that. But it's just, I just don't care enough to do that. Because you can see, I mean, already, like, what this was, and this was a one-sided conversation without, back to the therapist thing, without the kind of therapist sitting there and guiding you and keeping you in check and all of that kind of stuff. But it's also without, the conversation, the actual intercourse, I say something, you go back and forth, and all of this. This was already long and protracted, and I could just imagine where that could go if, But with that, we're good. I'm good. You may not be good. But it is one of these frustrating things because it's so easy. It's so easy to offend people, and I'm certainly offendable very quickly too. There's somebody on YouTube who I at least used to like his videos a lot. You kind of get like hints with people like actually shit, now that I think about it, there are several people on YouTube whose videos I used to like a lot. And then like one of them is this guy he has an aviation thing, which is pretty good. Could feel there was like some Christianity, like strong kind of I'm a Christian kind of, you know what I'm saying to that? But that's like off-putting, but I can get past it. But then the dude in some video was talking about wokeness and just like it kind of, you could see before that he was kind of like hiding something. And then you see like a little like, oh, there you go. Yeah, he's actually pretty Republican and probably like maybe a MAGA guy. I don't know. But definitely heading in that direction. And you're like, oh, okay. So cut that out. This other guy who, again, I really liked his shit. But then you would get like little hints of this stuff. And then today, I don't know if it was today that he put it out, but today in YouTube, I saw a video of his that was talking about this anti-vax caravan of truckers coming from Canada. He's Canadian. And, you know, he's like cheering them on and talking about how great it is. I didn't even watch the video. I just kind of like read the summary and saw the introduction. And I was like, yeah, okay. Unsubscribe. I'm good. And, you know, maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe who knows? You go through the video, maybe he's making fun of people who do that. Maybe he's actually like totally for vaccinations and for masking and for all the things that I think are good. I don't think so, but I don't know. I am leaving the possibility open, but it was still enough where I was like, yeah. Somebody else on Twitter who I've been a mutual with actually for a long time said that it's like the anti-vaxxers calling card for some reason. I am vaccinated, but I'm against the mandate. This is a thing that people say all the time. And incidentally, I am very much for mandates, mainly because like people frame mandates as it's one of these ridiculous, like I like Penn Jillette. He's a libertarian. I don't like the libertarian part of him, but he always talks about how everything, every rule, every regulation basically comes down to somebody with a gun. At the end, if you don't comply, then somebody has the authorization to use force against you, or somebody's using a gun to compel you. I think it's a very facile argument, but yeah, okay, I get it. But people always like turn these mandates into that, and in reality, it's like, okay, if you don't want to get vaccinated, then don't. But just stay the fuck away from everybody else. Go out in your little commune in the woods, and don't expose a bunch of people who are just trying to go about their business and who very easily could be immune compromised, or you don't know. Maybe they have some kind of disease where or they have some pre-existing condition where, like, you know, it's no big deal for you. Maybe, hell, I have asthma. You know, if I got COVID and I got a bad case of it, it probably would not go well. You know, maybe I'd make it, but maybe I wouldn't. Who knows? But you know, you don't fucking know. And that's like one case, and you imagine people that are immune compromised and have a lot of comorbidities and all this kind of stuff, and you're like, you're gonna go expose them, and whether you kill that individual or not, you're statistically murdering multiple people for sure. So I don't have too much sympathy for, like, you know. So what I'm saying is, anyway, like, it's a mandate, but it's not like somebody's going to hold your arm down and shoot you with a vaccine. It's basically like, okay, you have a choice. You can get vaccinated or don't get vaccinated. And if we were in a sane world, then we would all just have a fucking app on our phone and a little card with a QR code or something. If you're vaccinated, all that stuff is in there. If you're not vaccinated, you just don't get, you know, it would be a vaccine passport, basically. You just don't get to go to certain things. You know, and people that, if you want to go with a bunch of people who are unvaccinated, then by all means, maybe, I guess it's stupid and it's shitty of you, but okay. But if you want to go into like a coffee shop where a bunch of people who have pre-existing conditions or comorbidities or any of these other things, they want to be, and they don't want to be exposed to people needlessly, then just participate in the fucking system. That's not like somebody holding you down. That's just saying like there are consequences to your actions, which to me seems, it's something that most people are kind of comfortable with because I don't know. You're not allowed to drive drunk. You're not allowed to shoot your gun into the crowd. You're not allowed to do a lot of things that, you're not allowed to drive full speed the wrong direction on the freeway. There are rules, right? No shirt, no shoes, no service. It's not like somebody's at gunpoint putting a shirt on you. No, it's just if you don't wear a shirt, you can't go into fucking Starbucks. It's like, I don't know why people turn that into some big, like civil libertarian thing, when in reality, it's just basically the consequences of your actions. And I mean, the vaccine thing, at least the shirt, you could make an argument like the worst you're doing. I guess there's a health issue to it, but the worst really is just like most people don't want to see your naked body. With the vaccine, if you're not vaccinated or, if you're Sarah Palin and you're going to a fucking restaurant and you actually are COVID positive, you are spreading your disease to other people. And if there are people there, if somebody has these things that put them at greater risk, their choice is basically like they can't go anywhere. They're either like, I'm gonna roll the dice with my life, which is shitty, and they shouldn't have to do, or they're gonna be in a position where it's like, okay, I just have to stay at home all the time and I can't go anywhere in public and I have to, take like extraordinary precautions because a bunch of assholes can't be bothered to take very safe and effective precautions to protect me. And not only that, I mean, like you could imagine a world where it's like, okay, if you are vaccinated and you're getting tested regularly, you can go to a store or restaurant. I personally would have you wear your mask, but maybe we say no. But if you're not vaccinated, you have to wear a mask. That's all. You just have to wear a high quality mask correctly. You could have a world like that. And then you get to not be vaccinated and you get to do stuff and you're not exposing people as much. At least, I mean, there's PPE is not perfect, but it's some protection. But we don't have that world. We have a world where you have the people who are not vaccinated and unmasked insisting that they can't have their right to go and expose people to their shit. That can't be infringed. They can't have any limitations on them, no matter how much they're swinging their fist is hitting somebody else's face. Anyway, with that, actually, I do have one last thing that I'm going to say. I'm not even going to go into this at all, but Breyer finally said that he's going to resign. I am kind of shocked by this. I was fully prepared, and I'm still, like, until his replacement gets confirmed, I still will have a lingering doubt. But I was completely expecting, like, he's going to wait, and then he's going to die, and then Mitch is going to be, the Senate's going to get taken over by the Republicans, and then Mitch is going to hold up the confirmation. I mean, right now, all it takes is one senator to have a stroke. One Democrat from the wrong state has a stroke, and then we can't confirm Breyer's replacement, and then you lose another seat because, so it's a fucking scary thing. It's like not good. So anyway, seems like we're at least on a good trajectory there, maybe. Although then it's just gonna stay 6-3 instead of 7-2. But at least 6-3 is like salvageable. I mean, you do have to say some of these other guys are they're getting old. And then, I mean, although the Federalist lab-grown ones are pretty young, which was part of the point, and Democrats will not do a damn thing to expand the court or to put in term limits or do anything to fix it. It's really fucking annoying. But anyway, on that cheerful note, thank you as always. I really am taking off this time, so thanks. Zai Jen.